Okay, we're ready to go now. Thanks for your patience. So Jesus loved to tell stories. And some of the stories that Jesus told, people like to call parables. And basically, a parable is a story that shows us a picture of how God sees the world. So this morning, the book of Luke, chapter 15, hear these words that Jesus told to those who were listening. Jesus continued, "There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, 'Father, give me my share of the estate.' So the father divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all that he had, set off for a distant country, and there he squandered his wealth in wild living. And after he had spent everything there was a severe famine in the country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to his field to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, 'How many of my father's hired servants have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me as one of your hired servants.' So he got up and went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. The son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his servants, 'Quick! Bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate, for this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' So they began to celebrate. Meanwhile, the older son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked him what was going on. 'Your brother has come,' he replied, 'and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound.' The older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, 'Look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never even gave me a young goat that I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him.' 'My son,' the father said, 'you're always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad, because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' This is the word of the Lord. Let's be to God. So how many here have heard this story before? Just go ahead and raise your hand up. Okay, so we got a quorum. How many of you have not heard this story? Is this the first time ever hearing this story from somebody here? Great, wonderful. Before we talk about the story a little bit more, I want us to take a look at some artworks that I found on the internet. So the first here is a depiction of this art. Probably a little tough to see, but around the turn of into the 1900s. So this is early 1900s portrayal of the Prodigal Son. And then next we have our contemporary sculpture from the Crystal Cathedral depicting this scene. And next is a famous painting by Rembrandt of this artwork. Are we noticing any similarities? My question. And the final one, Mark. This is a contemporary Chinese artwork of this scene. Isn't that interesting? Okay, you can go to the next one, and you can turn the lights back on. So just let those images sort of soak in your head for a moment. And was there anything you saw in those images that you think was like consistent? Yeah, Sarah.
The son always seemed to be on his knees.
Yeah, the son he's on his knees. I mean, it's pretty obvious. Is there anything else that you saw that struck you?
The father was always embracing.
Yeah, the father is always embracing. Well, let's leave it with those two thoughts for now. The father is always embracing him, the son is always on his knees. And we'll come back to those. But first off, let me just say that this is a story about a man who had two sons. But I think there's something deep within us, whether it's because we're Americans or whether because we're westernized or whatever it may be, that we really cling to this younger son. We sort of lift him up on a pedestal. I mean, we sort of love this story of the young man who asks for everything from his dad, goes off to college, joins a fraternity, does the wild life that you're supposed to do in college, wastes all his money so he has nothing left, and then is forced to go back to his dad and, fess up because he made a mistake. Then the young man gets reinstated to the family, gets a position as a CEO in a big company. I mean, maybe that's not the story, but I think the story is sort of within us. We sort of cheer that this young man went off to go do something crazy, something squandrous. We love the rags to riches story, which does happen in this story. And we love the story because it tells us when you mess up, fess up. It doesn't really matter what you did. Just fess up to it and you'll get welcomed back. My question to begin with, though, is does this son really fess up? I mean, does he really repent, like earnestly? We'll come back to that in a second. But there's something you need to know first. The first thing is, in Jesus' day, fathers were the head of the household. They owned everything in the house, all the property. Everything that belonged to that family was controlled by the father. So the property, the business, anything that the children made and sold, like the father was in charge of it all. And so when the father would die, they would leave an inheritance to their male children, which is just the way it was back then. The women had sort of a different way that they received something. But for our purposes this morning, the men received a portion of the estate. And so in this story, the father, because he had two sons, would leave to the older son 2/3 of all that he had. Property, business, farm, everything. It all goes to 2/3 to him. And 1/3 of all of that goes to the younger son. That's how they would divide this. So when the younger son asks for 1/3 of what's coming to him, he's asking for 1/3 of everything. The land, the cattle, the farm equipment, the house. I mean, essentially 1/3 of everything. And even then, I think this part of the story is just as hurtful as it would be today. Because basically what this young son is saying is, hey, Dad, you're going to die someday. So I was thinking it'd be really great if you gave me the stuff you were going to give me when you died, and just give it to me now so I can go and make a life for myself, without you. Because that's the implication, right? I mean, I don't really want you a part of this. I just want the stuff. And the dad agrees, as hurtful as this may have been to hear. And as we know, things don't go very well for this young man, right? He finds himself broke feeding pigs, which in the ancient world was like the most disgusting, most degrading thing you could ever possibly do. And finally, the younger son comes to himself out of starvation, and he says to himself, Self, how many of my father's hired servants have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me as one of your hired servants. The son plans his speech in advance. He's driven by hunger. The story tells us he's hungry. That's the main motivation here. He's starving to death. But the text doesn't say that he's going to mean the words that he says here. It just says that he's going to say them. So this morning, I had a question, and the question comes to Josh back there, who agreed to answer my question. You ready for this, Josh? All right. The question is, do you and your brother, John, ever fight? You do? Okay. I got a more adamant answer earlier, but this is good. So you do fight. This is a fact. Okay, and when you fight, and you get caught by your parents or by whoever, what do they tell you to do after that? Okay. So you have to go outside. Are you told to say anything to your brother if you were to hurt him? Told to say sorry afterwards. It's kind of universal. And so you say, yeah, that's convincing, right? I mean, because that's what I'm saying this as a participant in this brotherly nature. You say sorry, but I mean, honestly, Josh, do you really mean it every time? Sometimes. Okay, so sometimes you do. But if you say it and you don't really mean it, what do your parents say to you? Okay. I used to hear the statement a lot, say it like you mean it. Has anyone ever heard that? Say it like you mean it.